on a lot of progress in the last 4 months or 5 months of 2024. I think you all know me, but my name is Julian Fox, and I lead this task force, but really supported by you all actually, and as a great collaborative effort. So let's jump right in. Many of you will recall in November last year, we had really a landmark meeting in Rome on ecosystem restoration monitoring and aligning Target 2 and the UN Decade. And this is, I think, the subset from the sort of the smaller workshop, but we actually had about 100 participants here in Rome, and over 3 days, many of you were here and many followed online, a really rich set of discussions, basically leading up to supporting Target 2. And so really today we wanted to share information and updates since that meeting in November. Many of us just got back to our offices from Kenya, from Substa. So we'll hear updates from Substa, from the CBD themselves, which will be really great. And also to present the progress we've made on Target 2 indicator methodology, working with and through the CBD's RTEC process, and particularly on the indicator areas under restoration and its linkages with the framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring. So we have a rich agenda, so I won't spend too much time working through it, but really we want to give you a big update on what we've been doing in 2024. As I said, Target 2, the methodology and the resource manual, which was launched for consultation at CBD Substa. We want to hear updates on Substa from Jamal, who I see there, which is really great. In parallel to developing the resource manual for Target 2, we've been doing a number of case studies, working in collaboration with C4ICRAF, and we'll hear from Mawa on one case study in Burkina Faso. And then after this sort of bulk update, we will record the session and share the recording afterwards. We will pause for some questions and discussion, and we'd love you to provide feedback and engage. And then we'll move to the second part of the meeting where Yelena will give an update on the framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring that we've been developed and some new functionalities. Again, pausing for questions and discussion. And then we wanted to also present a new sort of working group, which is led by Ashley, who will be giving us an update on the activities of this working group, really towards strengthening monitoring reporting of aquatic ecosystems. You know, Target 2 mentions clearly inland water, coastal and marine, and we realized that we really need to strengthen that. And we'll pause again for discussion, and then finally we'll wrap up. So I think many of you remember, but 3 years ago we created this task force, and many people have contributed over the last 3 years to really developing this monitoring framework for the UN Decade initially, and then sort of as the CBD process evolved and we're all celebrated the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework, we then also in parallel decided to support Target 2, and we had this large Target 2 working group meeting in Rome. And as I mentioned, Ashley's kickstarted a secondary effort on boosting our work on aquatic ecosystems as a working group underneath there. So yes, so basically in November, we sort of worked with participants on a roadmap of what we'd like to achieve under Target 2. We have this incredible opportunity to turn a lot of ambition for restoration into reality under the Global Biodiversity Framework, and that is a very ambitious target of 30% of degraded ecosystems under restoration by 2030. And in parallel, enhancing national capacities to monitor restoration and improve knowledge, research and restoration, and also I think implementation, right? There'll be a lot of implementation needed to reach a target like this. Then we have several checkpoints. 2024, the first MBSAPs will be submitted. COP16 toward the end of this year in Cali, Colombia. National targets, restoration targets will be a part of the MBSAPs. And then I think following on from the presentations you hear today, there'll be a need for a lot of capacity development of CBD parties and restoration practitioners. And I think a lot of opportunities for exchange amongst different restoration practitioners and CBD parties. and then several timelines on the CBD process, the national reporting and the stock take 2026, 2029. And in parallel, as we discussed a lot in Rome in November, is really aligning the restoration ambitions of the Global Biodiversity Framework with the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So we have these two very powerful, I would say, movements, the UN Decade and a very clear target, which we didn't have in the decade in the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is Target 2. And we'll hear more about this in the following presentations. So yes, I on that note, I will pass to Bethany. I will stop sharing my screen and pass to Bethany to give us an update on the Target 2 resource manual, if I can actually manage to stop sharing my screen.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Julian.
give me a moment. Yeah, over to you, Bethany. I will.
I'll wait till you finish the screen. Can people hear me?
There we go. Yes, we can very well.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right,
Yes.
good. I'm having a few technical difficulties with my own computer today, so let's see if it's going to screen share. Fingers crossed. All right. You should see it in non-presentation mode right now, and then ideally it's now in presentation mode for you.
Absolutely
Yes?
perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So thanks, everybody. I am going to give an abbreviated version of a presentation that George Gann gave at the SBSTA meeting. So I have removed some slides, but mostly I'm going to say, I've only removed a few of his slides, and I'm going to say a few less things on each slide. But this was a presentation put together by George that we gave at the SBSTA and that he gave. And I'm going to go through four things, just a brief background in the process, which Julian actually just did. So I'll be able to abbreviate that. And then an overview of the manual itself. And you can see here a picture of the cover of the draft. And then I'll talk through some of the key elements and what your opportunities are to engage. So just as a reminder, and I think everybody here knows this very well, Target 2 is the restoration target, and it is that by 2030, at least 30% of areas of degraded terrestrial, inland water, and coastal and marine ecosystems are under effective restoration in order to enhance biodiversity, ecosystem functions and services, ecological integrity, and connectivity. So we have been working on this since at least since before the meeting in Rome, and we looked at a lot of different guidance, including existing guidance that many people here have worked on. And I do want to specifically call out that we have tried to build in and refer from the short-term action plan on ecosystem restoration, which is an existing CBD guidance for restoration, and really making sure that we're learning from and using the previous work that's been done through the CBD to move forward to this next phase on Target 2. As I mentioned, Julian already talked a little bit about the background, but we had a series of webinars in 2023, then the workshop in Rome, and then really in earnest worked on drafting the guide with a series of different periods of internal and partner review in late 2023 and through until May of 2024, when we released this a few weeks ago at the SBSTA meeting in Nairobi. It is open for feedback through June 10th, and I will share a link at the end of this slideshow, and I will also put the link in the chat at the end of when I'm done speaking. So the purpose of this guide is to assist countries and partners in translating restoration commitments into restoration plans and operationalizing restoration at the scales called for in Target 2. And so that's what we're really aiming at. And the guide really has three components. So it has an introduction, which includes some lessons from the Aichi targets. It also includes discussion about the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. As Julian mentioned, the UN Decade didn't have a target. Now, with the development of Target 2 on the GBF, we now have a target for the UN Decade, which is great. We look at how to integrate Target 2 into the National Biodiversity targets and also into the NBSAPs, and then how to operationalize ecosystem restoration. So moving straight into the second chapter, where we look at integrating Target 2 into the National Biodiversity Targets and the updated NBSAPs. I'm not going to read this, this box, but this is an example of one of the boxes in the table that talks about the different types of tools that are available to support NBSAP development. And there are a series of key points in section 2, specifically that national policies should be applicable at subnational, local, and project scales, that NBSAPs should align with section C of the KMGBF, considerations for implementation, that NBSAPs should include finance and capacity development plans that include support for Target 2, that they should align and create synergies with other MEAs, and that they should select explicit numeric targets in each NBSAP, and that's super important. So one of the things we do in Target 2 is we actually mapped Target 2 to each of the other 23 KMGBF targets, and it maps to 20 of the 23. And so what's important about that, and this is just a sample of them, is to recognize that restoration is really vital to the delivery of the entire global biodiversity framework. The sections moving on through Target 2, it looks at, for example, who to involve in the NBSAP process, takes a bit of time going over that. And then sections 2.4 through 2.7 look at monitoring, reporting, and interoperability. And I want to specifically call out, and Julian will probably talk about this later, that the headline indicator is the area under restoration. But also, as Julian referred to, we're looking at how this intersects with the OCTAG and the different ecosystem typologies that are being developed, and then how we can disaggregate that by restoration type. Section 3 looks at operationalizing restoration for Target 2, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on Section 3 here. So first, we do use the definition of ecosystem restoration from the UN Decade, which is the process of halting and reversing degradation, resulting in improved ecosystem services and recovered biodiversity. Ecosystem restoration encompasses a wide continuum of practices depending on local conditions and societal choice. And I know that you're all familiar with the restorative continuum as adapted in the UN Decade standards of practice. So we do go through all of that and through the 4 major categories of restoration activities across the continuum. We also look specifically at the distinction between rehabilitation and ecological restoration, because these are called out in the KMGBF, and just calling out that where you engage all the way across to the right hand side of the ecosystem of the restorative continuum, you'll get to natural ecosystems, and where you're working in rehabilitation, you're more in transformed ecosystems. We can talk about this more in the Q&A if you have any questions about that. But it relates to the some of the key elements of Target 2, and specifically to ecosystem services and what your objectives are for your different ecosystem restoration activities. So the key elements of Target 2 are that the baseline are related to baselines and areas under restoration, the outcome sought, the concept of effective restoration, and the major ecosystem types. So I'll briefly go through that, and I don't have time to talk about all of this, but we do discuss the baseline quite a bit, and that the period from 2011 to 2020 should be used as a reporting baseline where data are available for monitoring and reporting. And then we walk through the selection of numeric targets, defining degraded ecosystems and different tools you can use to do that, and also the different definitions of degradation in different contexts. And that again gets at what your objective is, rehabilitation or restoration. And so these pieces are really developed in the guide, as are the outcomes sought. So whether you're aiming for enhanced biodiversity, enhanced ecosystem functions and services, enhanced ecological integrity, or enhanced connectivity, or ideally a combination of those things, because they do not have to all be separate. And ideally, most projects are going to incorporate some combination of those wherever possible. We do define effective restoration, and this is very important because if you look at the, how many do I have to go back to? Sorry, effective restoration is one of the key elements of Target 2. So I'm going back right here to the concept of effective restoration. So that was one of the most important things here, was to define effective restoration, which we define as standards-based restoration underpinned by agreed principles resulting in balanced net gain for people and nature. And this is an example of principles both from the SER Ecological Restoration Guidance and Standards and from the UN Decade principles. And then we also look at the different major ecosystems, ecosystem types in Target 2. So we have terrestrial, inland water, and coastal and marine ecosystems. I know Ashley's going to speak later about some of the work on inland water and coastal and marine. And we look at how to determine common and unique attributes for each ecosystem type and understand how those relate to restoration. And then to integrate that in relation to targets 1, 3, and 10 specifically. And then to look at planning, implementation, and monitoring at the highest level of precision practicable. And we also finally go through the 4 groups of activities in the remainder of section 3 of the guide. So this is very related to the short-term action plan on ecosystem restoration from the previous round of work in the Aichi targets. So those are these 4: assessment of opportunities, improving the enabling environment, planning, implementation, and management, and then monitoring, evaluation, feedback, and sharing results. And then finally, we have opened a request for feedback through June 10th. I will post this full link in the chat. You don't have to try to write it down. But as you're looking at this and providing feedback, we're specifically asking people for what essential information is missing from this guide, what information in the guide is here and that we don't need so we can make it shorter. Any other feedback you have, but more of this higher level feedback. And ideally, if you have any case studies that you would like to share to help illustrate key points in the guide. And if you're able to submit recommended case studies, we recommend looking at case studies as they relate to key points in the guide, provide sample text of no more than half a page, links to background information, supporting images, and your contact information, and send that to the link where we are receiving feedback. And with that, I am a minute over and I apologize, and I will stop sharing, and I was pretty close. So thank you very much. And I will post that link in the chat momentarily, and I'll turn it over back to Julian.
That was great. Thanks so much, Bethany. There was a lot of information there, and in fact, an entire draft resource manual, which is out for consultation, and we really want to have a fantastic product for CBD parties and all restoration practitioners to launch at COP16. Maybe if there's any urgent clarification questions, we can take them now, but we have quite a full agenda. So maybe I don't see any hands or any action. Maybe we move immediately and invite Jamal from the CBD to give us an update on SBSTA 26. Over to you, Jamal.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Julian. So which, are you seeing the right screen now, the slide?
It's perfect.
It's great. So, thank you. Yes, thank you for inviting to the task force meeting. And indeed, we have 2 updates from the subsidiary body meetings. So in fact, there are 2 subsidiary body meetings which have been happening back to back. And so I will try to bring you updates from both of them, although I have to say that the subsidiary body on implementation is finishing negotiations tomorrow. So there will be a reference to some documents, but we have to keep in mind that some of them are still under the negotiation. So the SBSTA 26, and I have to say that I've been looking for all the documents of the SBSTA 26 to find the relevant reference for information for this meeting. And I think the draft recommendation on the monitoring framework is really the key document of SBSTA, where we have some interesting progress made in terms of the decision, in terms of recommendations, which will be brought to the COP16 to decide upon. So first of all, why the negotiations on these document were important, because that was the point when the results and the outcomes of the almost the 2 years work of the ad hoc technical expert group on the monitoring was presented to the parties of the CBD and the major stakeholder group. So that was the, of course, that was a lot of contact groups, meetings which were necessary to discuss this information. But first of all, just maybe a very overall observation from the discussion is that, first of all, not all indicators are currently ready. Countries were also very specifically telling that there are very different levels of capacity, and therefore, depending on these different levels of capacity, there was also different views and opinions on how we should go in terms of the indicators and the monitoring framework. And of course, then there was a very consistent request in this document for the capacity building and capacity development. And also what was very obvious in the discussion, that the national monitoring system, the strengthening of the national monitoring system and the use of the national data should be considered as a primary source of information for the monitoring of the global biodiversity framework. So, and I would like to share with you just specifically a few paragraphs which I think would be important for understanding and where also the framework of ecosystem restoration monitoring should consider in its further enhancement. So first of all, we got the paragraph, but as you see, it's still bracketed. There are many brackets in most of the draft recommendation. Which is welcoming the ongoing work on the monitoring under other multilateral environmental agreements. And it actually mentions a few of them and invites the secretariats of those MEAs and other relevant initiatives to share information on the relevant monitoring initiative with the CBD executive secretary. So, and we really need to make the CBD secretariat now need to liaise with the secretariats of the MEAs and to compile that information and make it available before COP16. So I think that's also give us a very clear mandate and actually a requested pathway how we should operate with other MEAs with whom we're already working under this monitoring framework, but really find out, identify that information which is relevant for different indicators. So another paragraph in this draft recommendation is also talking about the global ecosystem typologies, and the countries are, as you see, it's also in brackets. They have agreed to add both levels of the JET. So the level 2 and the level 3 again is coming from the different levels of capacity of the countries, that not each country would be able to disaggregate the ecosystem types down to the third level of ecosystem typology. So the level 2 and the level 3 would be optional in the monitoring framework. So, and this is also something for us to consider. So the same draft recommendation is also saying that, of course, although we know that the parties really would like to use the national data, but in the case where there are no national data available, the parties they're invited to make use of the available existing SDG indicators and other global available data where relevant. It's also interesting to see that now there is a a new indicator, provisionally agreed to add an indicator to the target 22 on the land use change and land tenure in the traditional territories of indigenous peoples and local communities. This is, I think this is something for us and for FIRM as a registry to consider, because FIRM also has disaggregation by type of land, or type of land tenure. So I think this is something for us to consider for better coordination with the metadata and the source of information for this newly proposed indicator. Paragraph 30 is requesting the executive secretary to work with the parties and the secretariats of MEA's academic and research organizations, so in many other relevant organizations, to fill the gaps in the monitoring framework. And there is an annex which describes the gaps in the monitoring framework. And for the target 2 and the headline indicator for the target 2, the gap was identified as effectiveness of the restoration measures. So it's not currently tracked in the headline indicator, and therefore there is a gap in the ability to measure the improvement of biodiversity, ecosystem function services, integrity and connectivity. So exactly what you heard about, those parameters which you heard about in the presentation of Bethany. So since FIRM is still, we're looking how to enhance it, and colleagues from FAO, they've been in a regular contact with the ATEC members who were working on the target 2. I think for us, FIRM should be serving as a registry which would be able to capture those type of parameters on the effectiveness of restoration measures, although we know that the headline indicator is the main information source for the reporting. So, and finally, the annex, which included the indicators. So this is the like a snapshot, or also the screenshot of the headline indicator of 2.1, the area under restoration, and you see the optional disaggregations by ecosystem types, which are, as already mentioned, level 2 and level 3, by indigenous and traditional territories, by protected areas and other OECMs, and by type of restoration activity. So as we think that the FIRM is already actually in a very good shape, that it responds to most of these disaggregation options. And component indicators and complementary indicators are also being proposed here. So this document, which I have just presented to you, is now being translated and is being transitioned from the conference room, from the L document to the official draft recommendation. So you won't find it on the website right now, but I'm sure once the SBI session is over, all the documents will be posted. So that's the main document, the key document from the Substa 26 negotiations, but I would like to present you a few kind of an extracts from the SBI 4 negotiations document. So, well, first of all, the IPES document, I decided just to bring it to you for us to keep in mind that there is still the IPES on its 10th session has agreed to carry out several fast-track several assessments. Some of them are the fast-track assessment, and the one which I think which is relevant for the target 2 is the fast-track methodological assessment for integrated biodiversity inclusive spatial planning and ecological connectivity. So this is the target 1, but it's really cross-cutting, and we're looking into this concept of ecological connectivity and how to guide countries on that. So although it's a fast track, this assessment will be ready only in 2027. So therefore, the effectiveness of the restoration measures, which is also will be assessed through the connectivity, how restoration enhancing connectivity. This is something which we still need to consider even like before 2027. So the one of the document which I found, well, of course, it's also on the monitoring mechanism for planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. It's still under the negotiation. So I'm not citing any paragraphs here, but just for you to make just to have an understanding what this document will be containing. So this document is discussing the procedures and the scope of work of the preparation, the processes to prepare the global reports. So the parties at the COP15 have agreed that there will be 2 global reports on the collective progress, including the assessment target by target based assessment. This process will be organized through the party-led advisory committee. And the document will lay out the terms of reference of the advisory committee. So there will be 2 global reports on this stocktake presented to COP17 and COP19 respectively. And those 2 COPs will be looking into these global reports, and then of course will take a decision how to address the progress or lack of progress identified for different targets. So it's not only targets, as of course also will consider the section C of the GBF. This process will also trigger or will be supported through the informal technical dialogues among the parties, and of course all the important stakeholder groups participating there. So I think it is also relevant to what we're planning organize in terms of the Target 2 discussion. And this document is also providing the core reporting element for the non-state actors. So this is what we've been receiving many questions on this. So how the non-state actors can report, really being part of the framework. So this document will provide this information. So, and finally, another document which is on the SBI cooperation with other conventions and international organizations. I'm sorry, there's the EBES, please ignore the EBES headline. So this is really the document on cooperation, which I found that is really good, that we have a clean paragraph, which again invites FAO and UNEP in collaboration with other Rio conventions and relevant partners to continue implement Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, including through the roadmap for Target 2, in a consultation with the parties and major stakeholder groups. So this is, I think this is a very good sign of recognition of what we are doing jointly, FAO, UNEP, and CBD Secretariat. So just a few words of concluding words of my presentation is that, again, please, there was a lot of discussion in both meetings on the scientific and technical needs, capacity development for the countries, and the role of regional and sub-regional centers, which the countries have decided to establish at the COP15. So those regional and sub-regional centers, together with a global coordination center, will be announced. Well, it should have been announced actually now, but the country still deciding, agreed to decide it at the COP16. But the capacity building processes should not take into account those regional and sub-regional level, and the big role of those, the levels and the centers will be playing there. So with this, I would like to finish the presentation, and really if there will be any questions, and I can again just reference you to the website of the CBD. I will probably drop it in the chat, the link to the both session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamal. That was really great. I think drawing out the relevant parts of both meetings that are still ongoing, actually, and providing that really great summary. So maybe when we share the meeting recording, by then we'll also have the some of the final decisions, and we can share the links, because these are, I mean, that's really significant things that are being discussed. So maybe we pause for 1 minute if there's any questions of clarification or Jamal, and we'll also have a bit of a longer time after the next presentation. But if there's any immediate clarification questions, we can pause for a moment. And I can't really. Okay, so everybody's probably digesting a lot of information. Thank you so much. So now we'll move to our final presentation for this block from Moa Karambiri from C4ICRAF to present some of the case study work that's ongoing in Burkina Faso. So over to you, Moa, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Not sure how you see my screen. Do you see something like presentation slides?
We do. It's not in presentation mode. So maybe if you just push a button or
Is that okay now?
Now this is the problem I had, but so now it's in your mode. But I think we can live with it. We can live with it, Moa, if you would like to proceed.
Full mode, or should I do something?
It's not in full mode. So yes, maybe that's it.
Duplicate.
Try this. Yes. That's perfect. Please
Thank
go
you.
for it.
Yeah, to be here. So I'm going to share some updates on the pilots that the FAO is supporting in 4 countries regarding early support to the NBSAP process. So the FAO colleagues are here. So if there is anything you want to add or stop me, so feel free. So the presentation is going to be about the engagement we had in Burkina. We'll touch base on the institutional arrangement for ecological restoration. We'll also go through some elements of the classification system used in Burkina, the indicators, the gaps that emerged during the discussions, and some concluding thoughts. So the NBSAP process in Burkina, going back to the CBD itself, the country signed it in 1993, and then we went through many phases and many processes to have our first and second NBSAP. We got a lot of revisions also to align to the international or the developments at the global level regarding, for example, the Global Biodiversity Outlook 3, also some major developments as well. So currently, the NBSAP is in a revision process to align to the new framework, global framework, and the revision has been launched in last September. And then there are technical workshops. This is how we call it here in Burkina, technical workshops that have been taking place to domesticate the word that the ministry is using, to domesticate the global biodiversity framework and define now what the targets are going to be for Burkina Faso. So currently there are ongoing studies that the Ministry of Environment is leading in Burkina with regards, for example, to the M&E system, to the resources mobilization, and also to communication. So in Burkina, the final reviewed NBSAP is expected to be adopted June, July 2024. So our engagement was really about supporting a national dialogue that was instrumental to the overall NBSAP revision process in Burkina. Meaning we try to support them in the indicators definition and what they call the characterization of the indicators. So here you have a view on on how the data system works in Burkina Faso, who has the mandate to collect, and how the data is processed, and through which steps the data processing goes through. So first, you have the Ministry of Environment, which has the SPCNDD, the main technical body that is in charge of data with regard to environment and development in general. So in the SPCNDD, you have the ONED, which is really the main structure, the main organ that has that is hosting the data system in the country, and the ONED has been chosen as the main mechanism that is going to support the implementation and monitoring of biodiversity and land restoration, especially the target 2 that we are talking about. So the ONED has what they call le réseau des partenaires, and a network of partners from which they collect information, they collect data. And so this network of partners, you find them from the national, the state actors, and also the non-state actors. We'll come back to some gaps with regard to this system shortly. So there are protocols that are signed with the different parties. We have a qualified staff also that support the ONED, and there are also opportunities with initiatives like the AFR 100 and the Great Green Wall with regard to issues of indicators and harmonization of how we monitor land restoration. So this is a view of the national ecosystem classification. Since 2014, Burkina has its own national ecosystem classification. We can share the documents later if you're interested. And during the dialogue, we had a nice discussion with the FAO team with regard to the IUCN JET system that participants really liked a lot. There is a need for to translate those in French for more accessibility. The roadmap towards the COP16. In the ONED system that I showed previously, you have 190 indicators that have been identified and that are being monitored, but some of them still lack clear methodology. That's a gap already, and some have potential for target 2. Among the 190 indicators, you have land cover change, for example, through sustainable agro-silvo-pastoral land and water management. You have, for example, total area of degraded land, and so on and so forth. So there are discussions right now on terms, terminologies, on, for example, should we use restored land or land under restoration? So this is still under discussion, but following the workshop that we had, the engagement we had, I think land under restoration was the term that was kept in the document for now. So there was also discussion about connectivity and biodiversity, so which are not really coming out clearly in the current state of the indicators and discussions. There is also transition and support that are needed to help better map the parameters. Also, a big and important chantier, which is the French word, is really the issue of interoperability between the different and existing systems. So this brings me to more gaps. First is the lack of sufficient synergy between the structures, the parties, and the actors that are producing data, and also the data sources. For example, currently it's difficult to access data from the non-state actors. In Burkina, we have a big coalition of non-state organizations. So the ONED system is getting data from those from that big coalition. But at the same time, not all the NGOs and CBOs and CSOs are part of that coalition. So you still have a lot of organizations that are producing data, but those data are not really being captured into the national system. So this brings the issue of interoperability. You have the AFR 100 that launched the data collection base. You also have the Great Green Wall, which is currently in a workshop in Burkina to launch their own data management and data reporting system. And you also have many other platforms like the IUCN Barometer, for example. So there is really a need to engage clear and frank discussion on how cooperation and synergy could be built among those to avoid leakages, for example, double counting, and to promote more efficacy in the reporting system. There is also a challenges that came out of the engagement with regard to a harmony on data formats. So everyone is collecting data. The ONED is trying to get the data, but this comes into different formats. So how do you ensure traceability, quality control of the data, and effective reporting and sharing back of that data and information to the different stakeholders? There is also some indicators that are missing from the current ONED system, and also the 190 and other indicators that are related to target 2, not all of them are currently monitored. There is also challenges with regard to resource mobilization and to making the overall ONED system efficient. Yeah, it's operational efficient. So still continue on the gap, there is a non-existence of a national system to capitalize, especially on biological diversity. We have many platforms that are always being created from projects, from initiatives, but by the end of those projects and initiatives, you don't have any functioning system or platform anymore. That's one of the cases. Otherwise, we have a platform within the Ministry of Environment on biodiversity, but those are not really functioning. There is really a strong need for training. That was really emphasized during the engagement. Training in terms of tools with regard to data collection, to data analysis, processing, and specifically tools that are going to help digitalize the data collection on the field. Until now, there are still some data that are coming to the ONED on hard papers, and while others are using some tools like Kobo Toolkit. So they're really in need of, that need has been emphasized. There were also interest into the firm, and participants mentioned that there is a need to have more guidance on how to use it. Also, the challenge with regard to having high quality data from the field. Sometimes the data that are coming through the ONED system is being provided by other ministerial departments. So it's difficult to verify the quality of those data, since the ONED people are not really going to the field. They are relying on focal persons from the local, regional, and national level, and also from other governmental bodies. So there is also an issue, a challenge with regard to data being scattered, not harmonized at the national level. So few concluding words. the SPCNDD is really the main heart of the data system with regard to target 2 in Burkina. There are other data providers that are being identified, so there is a need to engage them and to see in how concretely the data could be made available, a link to the ONED system. So specifically, I think currently the ONED is in the process of signing some convention or some arrangements, some agreements with the AFR 100, and eventually with the GGW as well, the Great Green Wall Initiative. Yeah, I think there is also one aspect that is interesting still with regard to interoperability is the interest of the ONED system to have more connection to other platforms like the ANAM in Burkina and also the ENSD, which are really data platform also in Burkina, as well as the GGW as I mentioned, and the firm. Thank you. So there is Pablo and Gregory who are there online. So if there is anything you want to add or you want to amend, so feel free. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mawa. That was a really fantastic update on your progress in Burkina. I think the challenges you're facing are probably common amongst many parties to the CBD that are trying to set the target and develop a monitoring framework. So that was really a really great presentation, and just reassure everybody, we will share all the presentations after and the recording. But now we have some time to pause, and we'd really love to hear from you, hear from you all, because you've heard 3 very dense and rich presentations. And we invite you to raise your hand and don't be shy, and ask a question of Bethany, of myself, of Jamal, or Mawa. So please, we need an icebreaker question, and would be highly appreciated, or everybody's in shock and just absorbing all the information. Are there any hands, Yelena? Or...
No, I don't see any hands yet.
We have a shy audience today.
There's a question. Oh no, it's not a question in the chat. It's just a request for information from Anita. Yeah,
I mean, they were very dense presentations, and I hope they were of good value, because your time, everybody's time is very valuable. But maybe because I don't see any hands, and but we do have a good number of attendees. Maybe we switch to the immediately, because we're right on time, to switch to the second component, which is an update from Yelena, and then maybe we can have a longer period, and please start thinking of your questions from what you've seen from those 3 presentations and after Yelena, and we'd really love to get everybody engaged. But over to you, Yelena. Thanks to the first set of panelists. Please hang around, and hopefully we'll activate some great discussion after Yelena's presentation. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Julian, and thanks, as you said, to the really rich presentations that we just heard. I mean, personally, I work on these things every day, and yet I learned so much in this last hour from those presentations. And I hope my presentation can also contribute to this knowledge sharing. I'll be presenting on an update on the firm functionalities and search engine. Here we go. So the firm is the framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring. It's a tool and a framework that has been developed by this task force led by FAO. And the objective is to track global progress and disseminate good practices for the UN decade on ecosystem restoration, and to report, to support the reporting on areas under restoration for the Global Biodiversity Framework Target 2. And it really aims to to provide a collaborative and transparent framework. It has been developed in parallel with the Target 2 methodology and is consistent with the Target 2 methodology, and it includes the standardized parameters for collecting data on restoration and to bring together other platforms and data collection mechanisms from both governments and non-state actors under a common and interoperable framework. And it will compile data on areas under restoration to support country-led reporting towards a progress on Target 2. And by encouraging the shift to reporting geospatial data on areas under restoration, the firm also facilitates the monitoring of restoration and sharing the good practices for improved implementation. Yeah, and I think we heard some elements that were of the firm that were already mentioned in Jamal's presentation, linked to the CBD process, and in Mawa's presentation, how it can be linked to connecting these different data sources and supporting the country for reporting. So the firm itself consists of a few different parts. I mean, first it's, you can access it online at firm.fao.org. I think my colleagues will be sharing some relevant links in the chat. And it's, first of all, a registry. It's kind of the back end of the firm, where one can fill out a standardized form of information related to the restoration initiative and good practices, and for any ecosystem, that those restoration initiatives can be shared, that are then shared in the geospatial tool, along with other relevant geospatial data related to restoration that can be used for monitoring restoration. Then the information is similarly provided in the search engine, which also shares the good practices. And you can search relevant restoration practices. And we're currently developing a dashboard that will provide analytics on compiled restoration data, also summarizing what other platforms, what data other platforms are collecting in terms of restoration. So the way that the firm works, one first goes to the website, signs up by email, and joins an institution that they are part of and that their restoration initiative is part of. Then they can create and register their restoration initiative, and then add good practices and fill out the fields that are consistent with reporting for Target 2. That form is then reviewed by, in the case of good practices, by experts, and or in the case of initiatives by the lead of the institution, and then the validated data is shared on the firm geospatial and the search engine. And we have improved the layout of the firm and kind of streamlined it, made it a little bit easier to use, nicer looking. So here are some screenshots of the workflow to enter data into the registry, and then what some of the different sections look like, where you can delineate where the restoration is happening, identify which ecosystems that restoration is happening, what those restoration activities are, and what is the progress of the restoration according to the restoration targets. And if you remember in Jamal's presentation, these are all related to the disaggregations of Target 2. So here we have disaggregation by ecosystem, by activities, and then we also have questions in terms of indigenous territories, We're working on improving the linkage with protected areas and OECMs. And so the firm is also constantly being developed to align with the most recent methodology of Target 2. And then one can document their good practices in the firm. And these are the various steps for documenting good practices. We also invite, if anyone's interested, to be a reviewer of good practices. I know the Good Practice Task Force. And to note that we developed the firm in partnership with our sister task force, the Good Practice, the Best Practice Task Force, who have developed this part of the firm, and they're constantly looking for reviewers to ensure that the practices that are shared are aligned with the 10 principles for ecosystem restoration. And then the initiatives and good practices are shared via the search engine. And we launched the initiative search engine recently at International Day of Forests. It includes not only initiatives from the firm, but we have our interoperability in practice here. We have projects that are also entered through the Jeff and the Nature Commitments platform from UNEP-WCMC as part of the initiative search engine. And through the good practice search engine, it includes good practices from these other platforms, and we have over 1,500 good practices available there that you can search by region, by ecosystem, by country, and find out more about what restoration practices are out there. And so in terms of data compilation at the global, national, regional, and national scales, we are working on first reviewing and identifying existing sources of data on restoration to define interoperability between data sources. And we are working on developing this data dashboard to show the data, this data that's compiled, and make it available through this firm data dashboard in support of country data collection and country reporting on Target 2, kind of addressing the gap that MAWA pointed out in Burkina Faso, that there are all of these different reporting processes, but not a way to put this data together. So that's something that we're trying to do with these different platforms. And then link that reporting process, link the firm to the CBD online reporting tool to streamline that process. And so that's something that's in progress. And here on this slide, we have some of our partners. So in the platform level, we have in the first column where we've implemented interoperability with these different partners. The next column are platforms where we're working on implementing interoperability. We're also working with regional level initiatives to streamline reporting on restoration between these, and really piloting how that works with these various countries. And we just heard about the Burkina Faso case from MAWA. Here's a little sneak peek of our dashboard, kind of how we're thinking that would look like on compiling different data. We hope to launch a version of this by the end of the year, hopefully at COP. And so we can have the different disaggregations, and also by the data provider, as well as the progress of the commitments, disaggregation by ecosystem, and to visualize initiatives and good practices, and provide an interactive map to visualize national data. We've also been working on improving the support and resources available for the firm, We've updated our online user guide. We have, the team has been working on a series of video tutorials. We're available for trainings on use of it. It's included in the Target 2 resource manual, and in parallel to developing the Target 2 resource manual with SER and CBD and eCRAF, we're also working on translating that into an e-learning that we plan to launch at the end of the year. So we invite everyone to check out the updates that we have in the firm, and I'll pass it back to Julian.
Thanks, Elena. Another really rich presentation. I do see some activity in the chat. Maybe, yeah, I mean, if anybody would like to raise their hand and jump right in, we're ready for to engage. Otherwise, Matea, please, go for it.
Now, can you hear me now?
Very well, yes.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Took a while when I pressed all the buttons. Yeah, thanks, Elena. That was really, really interesting. I just wonder, I kind of missed the step. How is the firm going to be connected to the CBD online reporting tool? How will it, like, the APIs would take the information from the firm, and what was, yeah, maybe just something about that, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Matea. So yes, our plan is for them to be connected through the back end. So the firm will be directly connected to the CBD online reporting tool. This is something that's in development. So, you know, we will come through with more details once we define that workflow with CBD. But the idea is that there's a two-way data communication. So when the compiled data, if there's good compiled data available through the firm, that can be shared as a default data set in the CBD online reporting tool, and the country is able to validate that or reject it and provide their own data. And we also plan for the online reporting tool and the validated and country reported data provided there to be fed back into the firm. So we have then, once it is available, country reported data there.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much. I might be in touch just because we also working on Target Tracker. We'll also be connected with that. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Matea. Yeah, we had some great discussions with your WCMC colleagues in at Substar, because I think everybody wants to make sure that they have the up-to-date information, including on the Target Tracker. So I think there's some nice discussions to happen also with Natasha and your team at WCMC, because I think everybody wants to have the best possible information on the different targets. And that's also our vision. Thanks, Matea, for breaking the ice. Please, colleagues, feel free to raise your hand, or there's also some questions in the chat. Did you pick those up, Elena? Or
Yeah, I see a few questions. Perhaps the first question I see here. Sorry, we have Jamal has a question for Mala.
Go for it, Jamal.
Shall I go for it? Okay, well, it was just the discussion between the panelists, but I was really, I really enjoyed the presentation of Mala, giving really for us the reality check for methodologies and the capacity level at the country. So in my question was, because Mala, you have presented that you were able to work with the two ecosystem classifications, the national one, and you did the crosswalk to the global ecosystem typology. So I was interested in that part. So first of all, was it the level 2 or the level 3 you were able to disaggregate? And was it a difficult exercise, the crosswalk? And really, when you're transition from the national, you were able to align from the national to the global classification. Was there, what have you observed? Was there any, like, the new details you were able to pick up, or you rather lost something, you know, which was more like locally contextualized information? So it would be really interesting just to get a little bit of information here.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think Jamal, Jamal, thank you for the question. Pablo has responded because he was in charge of that section of the workshop. So he's the one who introduced the ICN jets during the workshop. And I think he was level 3 that we worked with. So it was relating also to both classifications. Pablo, if you want to come more on this, that would be great.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, Pablo.
Yeah. No, so it was a simple exercise with one ecosystem. So we were taking the trophic savannas at the EFG level 3 and comparing it with treed savanna class in the ecosystem classification of Burkina. And we were just explaining the relations between them, that the EFGs represent the likelihood of these ecosystems being present or not with different likelihoods, with different probabilities. And then we were discussing how this fit, especially with the ecosystem delineated by the country. But well, the general comments or feedback was that this is because we didn't have like ecologists among us, like technical people specialized on how this crosswalk can be made properly. So that the general feedback was that we will need more work on these crosswalks in general. And also another important thing, it was that all these materials, it would be good to have them translated into French language as well, which is like one of the limits to really understand the composition and the relations within the EFGs, the structure and the functioning, which is essential to do the crosswalks with the country classifications. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. Merci.
Thanks, Moa. Thanks, Pablo. Yeah, it'd be great to extract any lessons learned, because like Jamal, I'm extremely interested in what this looks like, this crosswalk, and particularly because it is a draft recommendation to take to COP16. So any lessons learned you can document from that, Pablo and Moa, would be really, really well received. Oh, that's great. Actually, I think we're right on time. We have 14 minutes left, and we have another presentation. So maybe we move straight to that and invite Ashley to present a new working group on aquatic ecosystems and some of the work that has been started there. Over to you, Ashley.
Hello. Hopefully you can see my screen. I'm Ashley Steele in the Forestry Division at FAO, and I have really, thanks Julian for the thumbs up. So I have a trio of updates on inland waters, and I just want to share with you what we've been doing at FAO and with our partners. So I want to point out, of course, that freshwater systems, and I use these two words interchangeably, freshwater systems and inland waters, that's my own vocabulary problem. They're quite special. They are inside of a watershed, for example, everything is inextricably linked by the flow of water. So these are very unique places. They're hotspots of biodiversity, and restoration in aquatic systems and inland waters in particular tends to be and look different from terrestrial or marine and coastal ecosystem restoration. This is a slide to set that how special they are stage. It was partially developed at the meeting for the roadmap for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that we held at FAO headquarters in Rome in November. And we created we just, in our breakout groups that were talking about aquatic ecosystems, we kept coming up with reasons why they're special. And they came under a couple of classes, that the condition of ecosystems, we think about the connectivity of ecosystems, we think about the human pressures on those ecosystems, their inherent properties, how we measure change, and all those socio-cultural considerations. And if you look at the terrestrial box, I mean, there's things that we don't know as well. You don't need to see all the detail. There's things we don't know as well in yellow, but a lot of things we feel like we know well enough in green to move forward, that they're well characterized, or that things don't change too quickly over time or over a year for us to monitor or measure. But when we come to inland waters and also coastal marine systems, but I simplified here, you see a lot more yellow and a lot more red. They are challenging ecosystems to measure or to define what is the area under restoration. We think about topics like tenure and access and knowledge. There's a bit more in the terrestrial side. And we think about things like complexity or the dynamic nature of ecosystems or that interconnectedness. And there's a lot more on the inland water side. So these aren't necessarily problems, but these are attributes that we want to be reflected in the reporting methodology and in the monitoring methodology, so we can properly incentivize and monitor the restoration of these important ecosystems. Our first activity was a webinar. We teamed up with the coastal and marine ecosystems folks who are more excited about that in the fisheries division at FAO. And we hosted a webinar where we really wanted to look at on-the-ground restoration. So what does it look like? We asked the speakers who have this on-the-ground experience to share images and create a visual understanding of what aquatic restoration looks like. We had over 800 registrants from 107 countries. And I think, I mean, this surprised me. I think they're a fantastic ecosystem, but I was still surprised at the enthusiasm that we saw. And I think it reflects on how much countries and participants want to see aquatic systems well represented in the Target 2 reporting. We had a couple of key themes from our speakers and from the discussions. What came out are things like the importance of scale and connectivity when talking about aquatic systems, the challenges with data and monitoring, the importance of community involvement in effective restoration, and the fact that expertise and experience exist. Sometimes when we hear the talk of aquatic restoration, we hear that it's maybe people don't know as much, but I think that we know plenty. It's just that they're hard. And these themes look a lot like the themes from our working group in December. So I think we're moving forward in the right direction. And we've just published a web story on this webinar, which I will share the link in the chat when I'm finished, if you want to know more about what the speaker said. I also want to highlight 2 Substa events. The first one was on Target 2 and Target 3, and that was held by NGO partners, Ramsar, and a lot of work, especially by TNC. The Nature Conservancy was presented on Indicator 3, where we want to stay in parallel. So we don't want our work on Target 2 for inland waters to be totally separate from Target 3. And then Julian also participated in an exciting event that was hosted by UNEP, focusing on freshwater biodiversity. So we're seeing this enthusiasm for aquatic systems and for freshwater really percolating through, hopefully all the way to COP, of course. So the final activity I want to share is the initiation of this small expert working group, and it is not a subtask force. So I'm showing you the subtask forces that are under this task force on monitoring. This is just a small invitation-only group with a targeted mission, and I'll share that mission in my almost last slide in a minute. But we will, of course, coordinate with the subtask force. We'll share information and take ideas, but the idea is that we can really move forward some work on designing a reporting methodology for area under restoration, thinking about monitoring. So we have some goals. We want to bring together expertise, and we feel that we need expertise on inland waters. We need it on restoration. We need it on the spatial data available and spatial analysis specific to inland waters. It tends to focus a lot more, for example, on watersheds and watershed structure. We need expertise on monitoring and that statistical expertise, and also on UN reporting procedures. So we couldn't find all this expertise in a person, but if we work across this small, but maybe 10 or 12 people working group, we can bring all that kind of expertise together. First goal is to really identify the recommended methodology for reporting on headline indicator 2.1 for aquatic, well, for freshwater systems. and start the thinking about relevant and possible monitoring indicators so that the reporting and the monitoring are not separated. And we want to maintain parallelism. And by that, I mean, what we're doing for inland waters should be parallel to what's happening in terrestrial and in coastal marine ecosystems for target 2. As I mentioned, we want our group to understand what's happening in target 3, so it stays parallel with target 3 and of course the other targets. We should also be building on what's done in the SDGs and other reporting processes. And this is a slightly different idea, but we're aware that national data collection systems will already have a methodology, and we want to maintain to the degree possible that interoperability. That's the enabling coherence with existing national systems and enabling a system for countries that don't have as much in situ data to report that is, both simple and globally relevant. I think that's the hard part for all of these. We had our first meeting last week. I think it was successful. I certainly had a lot of fun and learned a lot and felt that we started to move the conversation forward. This first bar across the top is what we worked on in the first meeting. We looked at defining the area under restoration for inland waters, looking at existing options for ecosystem typologies. We really focused on the GET level 3 and thinking ahead to how we could, and I put test in quotations because I don't mean just test the methodology, but move beyond discussion. So what do countries think of this methodology? How does it work when we actually apply those spatial analyses? And we're doing a bit of thinking, of course, in the first meeting about what other topics we need and what kind of output report we would have. In future meetings, we imagine at least 3 more. Those are the other boxes. And we just imagine topics like identifying the relevant spatial data for freshwater reporting. These are different data sets often than for terrestrial. Thinking about how the firm and the freshwater can function together, aligning with other indicators, development of this concise set of indicators, and this testing idea, this country feedback, trying it and incorporating what we learn from either spatial analysis experiments or country responses into this methodology. And of course, we need to figure out how to write it all up, and we hope to have some materials, not everything, but some strong materials ready to support Restoration Day at COP16. So I am happy to take any questions, and I'm happy that this topic is so, people are so enthusiastic about it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ashley. No, thanks for the initiative. I think it was identified in November that we needed to bring together a small group to move quickly on inland waters, and I think also we're doing a similar piece of work on the coastal and marine. So maybe just an invitation to everybody to write to us, because I know many ecosystem experts are a part of the task force, and if you'd like to actively contribute, because Ashley's pretty tough, she'll make you work. But any questions to Ashley, please unmute, and now we can switch to if anybody would like to take the floor and ask a question. We have all our panelists still here, and most people have stayed to the end, which is really great. Please feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question.
Julian,
yes, please.
it's not a question, but thank you, Ashley, for presentation. So it was interesting to see the subgroups in the task force working on the different ecosystems, the terrestrial. So I saw the rangelands. Maybe one of the meeting we can also feature the rangeland pastures and savannas, and the materials which you are preparing now, Ashley, through the consultation within this small expert group, it would be really good on defining the different parameters. So it would be really good if you could connect also with Julian and with Bethany. So as we are finalizing now the overall guide for the target 2, which definitely, and we are thinking how to feature those different ecosystems. So, and of course, as the resource guide should not be a big document. This is in fact the reference, the comments which we're already receiving from the users, from the reviewers, that probably the guide should not be really like, it should be still comprehensive, but not a big document. So we're trying to find a balance how to bring different ecosystems. So maybe it would be really good if we could have like more of a high level information on each of the ecosystem types, but then giving the reference to more specific documents which you're already preparing, and those which, as you said, will be ready by COP. So we're synchronized and parallel in time. So that's just a recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamal. Yes, no, Ashley, Elena, and I, we're in regular contact. And yeah, over to you, Ashley.
I just wanted to let you know that we did give the working group some homework for the first meeting, and that homework was to review the resource manual and to make sure that aquatic ecosystems and freshwater in particular are well represented. And I've reviewed the whole thing, and poor George has heard me add watershed in a lot of places, and I have a few more bits to add. But I just want to make sure I'm not over promising what could be ready by COP16, which seems like it's going to happen tomorrow. I don't think there'll be a lot of new documents yet prepared and finalized to reference, but hopefully proposals and ideas and examples. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Ashley, for taking the initiative. And yeah, just to let you know, we also had a vacancy announcement for FAO to really boost the work that Ashley's doing on inland waters, but also marine and coastal. And we had hundreds of applications actually. So we really want to accelerate this work and feed it into the Target 2 resource manual toward COP16. So yeah, I think we can start wrapping up, but really putting a shout out to the task force to please submit your ideas. I mean, we have some incredible people in the audience here that have their own monitoring platforms, that have their own programs of restoration, and it would be great for you to present them. I mean, today was a big update, I think, on the work leading up to Substa, and now in the next task force meeting, we can invite partners and members of the task force to present their own work. So please send us your ideas, and in the next task force meeting, we can open it to many of our members to present their own work on restoration. So an open invitation to scan the QR code and send us your great ideas. And I think I don't see any hands. I think we can even finish a few minutes early, unless there are any burning questions. But and we'll share the recording and the links to the presentations in the coming weeks, as well as the relevant Substa documents. And yeah, you'll have all the information for all 400 members. So we'll try and update everybody in one email. So thanks so much, everybody. Thanks so much to all the presenters. As Elena said, I actually always learn in these webinars, and then I hope that you also found it valuable and useful. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day, morning, evening. Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.